Hey folks, it's Mark here. To communicate some grave news, we are flat broke. And, you know, for the past fucking, 81 weeks, if not more, probably more, we've been asking you guys if you could fling some money our way, and we have some people who are very kind and do donate money to us every month through recurrent subscription, some for as little as £1, and hey man, every single bit helps. But it's getting really hard for us to sustain this podcast, because let's be honest, all the shit you need to do to make this podcast work isn't particularly cheap. And when I say isn't particularly cheap, I just mean it's not free. It's not expensive, don't get me wrong, but we do need a little bit of financial support from you guys, so every little does indeed help. If you go to www.unsungpod.net/donate, you can give us any amount of money on a recurring basis, on a one-off basis. If you've done so before, we're not going to say do it again, because hey, I mean, doing it once is just enough. But if you haven't donated and this hasn't made you feel bad, then you definitely should feel bad. Just go and give us some money.
I think it's kind of interesting as well. We've got a couple of listeners who have basically paid all of our internet costs for a year, and then we've got like 99.6% of like everybody that doesn't pay at all. If you guys would just throw in like £1 an episode that you like, it would make a world of difference. It would also take the burden off the folks that are actually chipping in a really big way, because it's amazing of them to do that. Like, it totally is a little bit overwhelming when we see that.
Yeah, totally.
And it'd be lovely to just spread that a bit more evenly. Seen as socialism is the
drip down effect does not work in podcasting.
It does not.
Nor does it work in general economics.
And the alternative is either we stop doing this, which we don't want to do, or we start putting in adverts, which we also don't really want to do.
Yeah, we've had some offers of adverts and it's...
Yeah, so any little, like I said, helps. Like Chris said, it takes the burden off of other people who donate. And yeah, we don't really mean to make you feel bad, but we do need some help, guys. So please, thank you.
Sad cash call.
Help, pal.
Hey guys, the world hasn't ended yet. How great is that?
How did you like that for an intro to a podcast?
Oh my god.
See what we're going to do to you if you don't cough up?
Yeah, no.
We're going to front load the misery.
Yeah, front load the misery. We're doing a pretty
Boris Johnson is Prime Minister. Donald Trump still appears to be President.
Europe's on fire.
Europe is literally on fire, and we have no money.
We're living in hell, basically, aren't we?
I think it's the alternate timeline.
Yeah, it's just a strange week.
Yeah, it's a very odd week.
I mean, it's been a strange series of weeks and months and years. But it was definitely...
decades even.
It was like a gently bizarre week, because everything's happened incrementally. It's like if someone was trying to shove a traffic cone up your ass. Yeah. It's like the big bit at the bottom went in today, but obviously we had months and months and months of the cone itself being slowly worked up there.
Yes, so the clay inside you.
It was a little bit of a shock when that big flat bottom bit of the cone finally popped up inside us. It wasn't like it just got...
I mean, even the very top of a traffic cone is beyond what is expected of a colon.
I think that was already in when we started the podcast. We probably arrived for that first episode with the tip of the traffic cone, maybe even up to that little helmety lip thing that they all have.
Yeah,
that makes them easy to pick up and throw,
or wear. As some people
put
tend
on top
to.
of statues.
Yeah, exactly.
If you've never been to Glasgow, very famously, is it Duke of Wellington?
Yep.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, Duke of
outside
Wellington.
the Glasgow Museum of Modern Art.
Yep, Gallery of Modern Art at the Goma. Always has a traffic cone on his head, and if it gets removed, it gets replaced immediately.
There's also a brand new statue of Charles Rennie Mackintosh down in Finniston,
which has it on his head as well.
And it took 3 days before a traffic cone was put on his head as well.
I like that, but it works better with the Duke of Wellington, because it's a kind of mark of irreverence towards, you know, the Empire and England and Westminster and that kind of thing.
Whereas
Charlie, he was...
Yeah, we tried to mark our irreverence by burning down his buildings normally.
Well, not so much burning them down, but certainly failing to implement proper fire safety regulations.
Twice in a row. Somehow. It's interesting you mentioned like this. It's like slowly been coming on. I started if you guys heard of Years and Years, the BBC program?
Watched all of it.
Just started watching it last night. Watched the first 2 episodes, man, and it's the same. Like it's incremental in that too. Like it just happens slowly.
As a Scooby-Doo ending, they pull off his mask. They're like, I can't believe it was you.
Oh, fuck. Yeah.
And Emma Thompson's like, I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you pesky kids.
But it's like that. Like it's obviously the whole point of when Russell T Davies wrote it was to kind of be as true to life as possible, and it does kind of feel like that. Maybe I'm just feeling pessimistic.
It's good. It gets a bit BBC, but you know.
Russell T Davies is BBC now because he did Doctor Who, so you know.
Yeah, it's got some really, really good bits, but it does get a wee bit sort of like Lovejoy.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what I've been watching. What I've been watching recently.
Better be Deadwood.
It's been Jonathan Creek.
Oh, right.
There's nothing more BBC than that, and I fucking love it.
This week I spent a fair amount of time watching live music. Which is sort of within the remit of this podcast.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Yeah, I've seen a few gigs as well.
I saw I saw Thou after we finished the previous episode.
Yep.
Thou and Moloch and Cartilage. And Cartilage were by far the best band of that night, I think.
I didn't really dig Moloch at all.
No.
They didn't ever go above the 3rd fret.
You pointed out they had 3 corn riffs.
Yeah. And then Thou, the thing with Thou is they've got like 5 albums but then 24 EPs and then split records and stuff like that, and it seemed like they were fresh back on tour and weren't quite, you know, tight and stuff like that, and I just felt their set list was very kind of one-dimensional, and I know they've got a lot more there, so I was a bit disappointed. That's probably the operative phrase, one-dimensional. What I felt was that like people were like they were there to see Doom, they were there to see something loud, but they weren't particularly concerned with how good the Doom was. It's like, because there's Doom and there's Doom. There's stuff that's loud and slow and heavy, and then there's stuff that's loud and slow and heavy but really, really well done when you know, look at some of the kind of masters of that genre. This is by definition Doom, but it's not really doing anything particularly interesting. The vocals were really monotonous. There was a lack of dynamics in it and stuff, which is interesting because like they are one of the most dynamic bands in the studio. Last year they released 4 full-length EPs which all related to a different sound. So they had like a grunge record, they had like a pared back sort of acoustic one, they had like a proper atmospheric drone record. They can do all of these things, and then they released their album, which was really, really good. But then, I was fairly bored.
Didn't come across. I mean, the sound was astonishing as well. It sounded amazing. So a lot of people were just getting off on the volume and the impact of the sound, but the actual material was really disappointing. Then on the Friday night, I went to see Flock of Seagulls, courtesy of my man Dave here.
Oh yeah, did you enjoy it?
It was honestly one of the most tragically bad things I've ever seen. It was punishingly cringe-inducing. Only good thing is there was one great track in the middle of the set that I didn't actually know what it was, and it had very little singing in it, and his voice is gone. I mean, he looks like Frank Black, or he looks like the third Mitchell brother now, and sounds like it as well. Like his singing is just croaky, it's just fucked. But they did pull it out the fire a little bit with a couple of killer songs at the end, including Iran, which was passably good, and just for nostalgic value, a good buzz. You had a busy weekend. You were at doing the Rabbit Hole Festival, were you?
Doing the Rabbit Hole Festival, yeah, it was pretty good. I was DJing on Friday night, then I slept in a car and I drove home. That's and then I DJ'd in Glasgow.
Yeah, you made like a cameo appearance at a comedy show. We're like, what the fuck's Dave doing?
And then I went back up on Sunday. Oh yeah, I saw James Acaster as well.
Yeah,
who's funny. He got very annoyed with a drunk Glasgow audience, even though 99% of them were really into it.
What did they expect?
And then went back up to doing the Rabbit Hole. Saw Battles, saw Blank Mass, and I got my body painted white. And
I heard about this. You were on stage with Free Love.
I was flying a flag for them because they needed somebody to fly a huge flag and go into the crowd with them. So that was fun. I had a busy weekend.
Sounds
I'm only just recovered now.
Monday night I went and saw The Body.
Did you go? I had a ticket. So I had a ticket for The Body and then didn't go because I was asleep.
It was without a doubt one of the loudest shows I've seen in the last decade. It was thunderously loud.
They tend to be.
It started, I think, quite poorly, and then they don't play very long. The whole gig was done by like 9:45. It was ridiculous. you could understand people feeling a little shortchanged with that. I know that's their thing though, but by the fourth tune, something changed in the fourth tune just in terms of the material they were doing, and it actually got really good. So I was bracing myself for another disappointing night, because that was a run of a few shows that kind of were a bit crap, to be honest. But no, they kind of pulled it out the fire, and it picked up. So yeah, that was decent. There's a few more on the horizon that I'm looking forward to, but I guess given the week that was going on in the world, fucking Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister, I mean, it doesn't get much more stupid and fucking surreal than that. So I don't know why I hoped anything was going to be good this week at all.
There's nothing doomier than reality.
I mean, for people outside the country, they may be thinking, oh, people have leaders they don't like and stuff. It's like, yeah, but you very rarely have a leader that you actually can't understand how such a balloon would. How did we get to this point? And it's like the Trump thing. You know, when people say he's like the British Trump, the most like Trump thing is the fact of the incredulity that somebody like that gets to any high office, because he's just a fucking nugget.
Yeah, he's not like you can see how, you know,
Theresa May. I couldn't stand Theresa May, but she was like she was a politician.
You can see how a lot of right-wing politicians get into power because they have played the game, and they've done politics, and you know, they're professional politicians, and they have beliefs that I might not agree with, but at least they have fucking beliefs. Whereas the two fucking buffoons at the head of the UK and the US right now, they're not politicians, they're caricatures.
Yeah, they are.
And they are so out of... They just don't seem real.
Yeah.
And like, I think 10 years ago, like, nobody would have believed you when you said either of them would be in office.
You know what it reminds me of, right? See, if you tried to play a game of football, soccer football, with a rugby ball, and every so often, you know, you kick the ball in the air and you expect it to land and bounce one way, because it fucking shouldn't be there. It lands and bounces in a direction that makes no fucking sense at all, and then bounces in another direction, and so nobody can actually track it because it's bouncing left, right, left, right, left, right. The whole thing becomes unworkable and unpredictable. And I think that's the fucking Trump and Boris Johnson effect. It's like, in a simple decision, you actually don't know what way this fucking idiot is going to land.
Yeah.
Even in what seems like a fairly basic thing. Just look at last week's fucking racist tweets and the fact he came out and redoubled his efforts on it. And Johnson, the fucking things, even just about Scotland.
Yeah.
We should be put in ghettos and systematically exterminated. And fuck, who knows, man? I mean, it gets sillier and sillier. And the weird thing is, we started a music podcast and have ended up sort of documenting the decline of Western civilization in the process.
Mark, you've been home from your trip of a lifetime for a week and a half. Any update on reality? How are you living it?
I like that how Mark's now in the post trip of a lifetime era of his life, where everything's downhill from here, mate. It's spearmint polo shirts for the rest of your fucking life.
The horror continues apace. What can I say? Like, there's nothing more to add apart from the fact that I don't really understand what's going on either, and I don't like it. Make it stop.
Fairly honest assessment there, Mark.
Make it stop.
So you chose this week's record
to express the frustration and rage within all of us.
Yeah, it's an angry record.
It is. This is witnessed by Modern Life is War.
Modern Life is War. There's a fucking fitting title.
Yeah, I know.
Only getting more relevant.
It never ages this title, does it? Because the Modern Life is always, I guess, always war.
Like, one of the points I was going to make about, you know, melodic hardcore in general is that it's quite melodramatic, but genuinely that name has become more relevant.
Yeah. The thing is, they're not even like a massively political band. They're like, Jeffrey in particular is a lyricist and a vocalist, is much more, he likes to comment on like living in working class life and, you know, trying to make ends meet and all that kind of stuff, and coming from a really fucking shitty small town called Marshalltown, Iowa, sorry. But the reason I picked this record is because,
can I just say though, what he wouldn't have, like, back in, like, you know, this came out with 2005, so then, you know, go a few years later, Bush, but then you've got 3 years later they took a hiatus in 2008, probably because by the time Obama came in, you were like, well, Modern Life's a pain in the arse.
Yeah.
You know, a wee bit later, like, oh, Modern Life's not ideal. Modern Life's getting a wee bit annoying. Modern Life's I don't like the way this is going, until now he's like, we need to reform the band, guys, because fucking Modern Life is war.
I'll come back to that point in a minute, but the one reason I picked this record is because melodic hardcore has grown quite a lot over the past 15 years, but this record is, I think this band are really unsung because they've influenced a lot of bands which have went on to do quite not huge things, but you know, become reasonably famous in that kind of scene. And I seen Modern Life is War a few years ago, and they played the bottom floor of Classic Grand, which holds like, how many does that hold?
That's crazy. Yeah,
250 maybe.
Yeah, must have been like less than
4.5 people,
less than 100 people. Yeah, probably it was less than 100 people there, and they were on the 10th anniversary tour for this record. And this record, along with other records that came out around about the same time, which we'll talk about in a second, kind of defined the sound which a lot of kids did latch onto and have latched onto and continue to, you know, exploit, and it really comes from here, I think. So I thought this was like a sort of fitting one for the podcast, because it's an unsung record by an unsung band. The record itself is their most sung record, but the band itself I don't think get enough credit for, you know, what they started.
Yeah, I mean, under-recognised bands are a perfect fit, just as much as under-recognised records by big bands. Yeah.
It's interesting. It's not a genre that I ever got into, and it's one that a lot of my friends did, and I was always like, you know, coming into close contact with, and I was quite often going to gigs and there'd be a band like this.
We were similar, I think. We were on the periphery of it, but it was a genre that took itself so fucking seriously that I could never fully take it seriously.
Yeah, that's what I think always put it off for me, was how earnest it was.
Yeah. I think you were saying about how good this record is. I noticed that Sputnik Music called Witness possibly the greatest hardcore album of all time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd go that far, but probably the greatest melodic hardcore record of all time for sure. It was in the early 2000s when melodic hardcore kind of branched off in two different directions. Like bands like Pennywise and Bad Religion and stuff, and Descendants were arguably doing melodic hardcore in the 90s. And I suppose a lot of Fat Wreck were signing a lot of bands which sounded a bit like, you know, Pennywise and Bad Religion.
Yeah, but their kind of branch of it, that kind of comes from Descendants sort of from territory, doesn't it? Whereas there's that kind of, and there was like bands like 7 Seconds. And
Leftover Crack to a certain extent, stuff like that.
The Faith, Dag Nasty,
big one.
Yeah, Gorilla Biscuits as well.
Gorilla Biscuits, 80s band, yeah, really.
For the first time in my life, all passed me by. Procrastinate, it can wait, I put it off. Let's start today. Let's start today.
Yeah.
Anything Water Street Eagles really has been involved in to some degree, it kind of falls into this kind of thing.
That was more of a, like, Bad Religion, that kind of Descendants branch was like more of a kind of like almost like a nastier pop punk thing. It's tuneful, it's singy, whereas this was like more akin to the hardcore, like the kind of proper stuff, but just with like more tuneful riffs. I noticed that one of the definitive aspects of it was not that it's like massively singy, because it's often not massively singy, but it's just that there's more melody within the guitar lines as well. It's not, the melody doesn't have to apply to some boy like going into an emo bit. It can apply to just the more melody within the instrumentation as well.
Well, that's what I was going to get at. So there were bands like that who were instrumental in kind of making kind of angry pop punk and making it heavier and heavier. So then you started to get bands like 88 Fingers Louie, who then became Rise Against. So you get bands like Kid Dynamite.
Yeah, Kid Dynamite is like a kind of slightly snottier version. You know what I mean? It's got that kind of much more oi kind of like punk rock sort of take on the genre.
But then some of these bands started to listen, were also big fans of hardcore, like Bane and H2O and stuff like that, you know, and
Bane,
sick of it all and stuff.
Bane featured, was it Aaron, what's his name, Bedard?
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
The guy that
Alan Delbeck.
He was in Converge.
Yeah.
Same one. Yeah.
So bands who were into that kind of punk thing started to when I started listening to melodic hardcore, they either went down the Rise Against route, and I loved the first two Rise Against records. The first kind of 4 are quite good, but I love the first two, and they're now basically Nickelback of fucking hard rock, like punk. Like they're just such a fucking middle of the road band now. It's actually terrifying.
Right from there, I see the neon grids of cities. With 6 million people that keep their fires there. It's true,
Or you went down this kind of Comeback Kid route. So Comeback Kid were kind of foundational in taking like that snotty punk element of it and combining it wholesale with a hardcore, whereas
someone empty words with a healthy stick and I'm trapped. Let it go harder to say. It over my head and now I'm taking over me. I've only made things worse today. And everything's in my way.
Well, Comeback Kid were peers of these guys, weren't they?
yeah, definitely.
They toured. Did Comeback Kid not do a tour with these guys and Bane at one point? Was it
Yeah.
not like some kind of package tour or
Yeah,
something?
Bane broke up a couple last year, maybe the year before, but they're foundational to this whole kind of scene. But they were going for years. But I suppose the real progenitor of this sound is probably sick of it all.
No friend to encounter. Guaranteed to die alone. Die alone. Keep the money.
If you want to go back to the 90s.
Yeah, but they are much more hardcore. They're like less on the melody, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, there was a big explosion of it though in the 90s, because one that I always remember my friends really being into was Ignite.
Yeah, I love Ignite, man.
Yeah, the kind of early 90s, and they're like a lot chunkier.
They're
like,
Pennywisey, more Pennywisey for sure.
yeah, but I think they're also like a bit riffier. Pennywise did have that kind of vocal Bad Religion-y thing sometimes, and Ignite were just that wee bit more aggressive. Another one was H2O.
But deep inside's more than you can see. Thicker than water. Enemies more, so much more to me. Thicker than water. We've all been struggling.
Yeah, I mentioned them earlier on. Yeah,
mid-90s, man. They
Still going.
You can really hear the evolution of the genre within that band, I think.
Yeah.
Avail.
Avail, yeah.
They were another example that kind of came up. And like you said, Strike Anywhere and Rise Against being like fucking two of the biggest, most obvious reference points.
With Strike Anywhere, they don't really tour much anymore. I don't even know what they're doing, but they're compared to Rise Against, they're definitely a peer of them. They're fucking tiny, man. Like, I seen Strike Anywhere and a Wilhelm Scream supporting Pennywise, and when Pennywise played the ABC, you know, it's the kind of size of those bands. And Strike Anywhere were on first. I fucking love Strike Anywhere, probably one of my favourite bands, to be honest. I don't listen to them much anymore, but they're also kind of in that vibe. But these bands obviously took the kind of old school hardcore. Bands like Modern Life is War obviously took the old school hardcore and combined it with emo, like 90s emo.
Yeah.
You know, because you can. That's
definitely.
A lot of that comes from there.
And they kind of paved the way for bands like Touche Amore and stuff as well.
Yeah, Touche Amore, Defeated, La Dispute, bands that I all like. A lot of bands from Britain as well, like Heights, Dead Swans, from Glasgow, Departures. You know, that kind of stuff. And a lot of those bands have either broken up or they've either went more emo, like Departures have, or La Dispute.
It was like a really big thing in Britain. Like I remember, like I always associated this sound with Dundee.
Well, the Fight Back were from Dundee, who then became Departures. So
Right.
that's kind of where it comes from.
Yeah, there was a big, an excellent DIY scene in Dundee after that kind of post-hardcore thing that we spoke about in the Dundee mixtape.
I always thought of it as like Telecaster hardcore.
Totally is, yeah.
'Cause, they'd all have Telecasters through Fenders and like try and get that big, huge open chord sound.
More texturey hardcore.
Yeah,
It's
rather
more
than
kinda more textured guitar sound
think
rather
that
than big riffs.
the psychology of it's really interesting. I think we were kind of talking about like, I mean, I've been talking about the band Idols quite a bit recently, obviously, and I kind of feel like there's a kind of woke broness to that. There's like this subculture of young men who used to have these outlets that you didn't really have to think too hard about, whether it was hard rock or new metal or whether it was punk rock, or you know, you were just into it and you didn't think too much about the political correctness of it. And now you've got this good development in terms of people being more conscious of the context and the messaging and how it comes across, and is the environment welcoming to women and members of LGBTQ plus communities and stuff, and that's great. Like a genuinely very, very positive development, because it was always off-putting at hardcore shows, the sheer fucking sausage fest of it. But I think it's interesting, the psychology of things like melodic hardcore, because there's a need to vent these really primal urges, but also want to be doing it in a way that's kind of like, what's the phrase, like it's like, I was trying to use the phrase woke broness. Like, you're still a bro, you're still doing your manly bit, and you're fucking doing this, and you're like pointing at the sky and shouting and singing, but the whole thing is done within this kind of context and sort of understanding that you're all very on message with like things that are much more progressive. And like, I feel like with melodic hardcore and then onwards into emo, there was that very much like, right, we're men, but we have to get in touch with our emotions. And it also, it kind of led to this weird thing that it went from being just dramatic to becoming melodramatic. You know, it just kind of, it's almost like we got really swept up in this like connecting to the emotional content of things to try and underplay the machismo of it. And then you ended up with this like era of really fucking overwrought, angsty, emotional hardcore with people breaking into these high kind of like Daryl Palumbo type, like over milked emotion of it. And like I was saying earlier on, that stuff, it was so hard to take it seriously. And even if musically at times it kind of kicked ass, you're just like, fuck's sake though, this is really like cringe inducing. You know, and I feel like this is just on the cusp of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways it's a kickback against that, because that was the big sound that they railed against at the time. It's like, well, this is fake to a degree, because it's like all performative, whereas this is obviously quite sincere. But
too sincere.
It never really feels as though they're like trying to fucking be anything other than themselves.
I think like Dave used the word like over earnest, or the phrase over earnestness, and I think that's definitely true. As much as I really like some of the music, I'm very aware of the fact that it's a bit of an eye roll, you know, and I can imagine female friends of mine are still, even though this is much more modern and evolved, are still quite alienated by the kind of like, oh god, alright, I get it, you're a sensitive guy. It feels quite put on, man. Like I still struggle to get into it. And so obviously with this, I've really engaged with it. Like, I really wanted to hear it and really try and appreciate it, and I do think some of the instrumentation is great, but I still, I just have a real problem getting past.
It's because you have no emotions, Chris.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is.
It's because you're dead inside.
I think it's interesting that you've got the reaction of someone that likes a lot of emo stuff, you know, from the 90s and all that.
Yeah, but I'm kind of choosy about how overwrought that is. I do struggle with a lot of it. Like, some of it is just way too fucking cheeseball and way too contrived. I'm really picky about it. I think like Far is one of the most emo bands I like, and even then at times some of my least favourite ones were ones where I think they over-egged the pudding a little bit.
I mean, yeah,
it's because your favourite emotion is cynicism. So like, I like my emo to be cynical and nihilistic.
My favourite emotion is Schadenfreude.
So this came out at the same time as other records, which were all just as influential, particularly Have Heart's Songs to Scream at the Sun, which is what I might have picked if I didn't pick this, which I might still pick at some point.
By him?
By Have Heart.
Have Heart.
Yeah, they just did a tour, a reformed tour, because they broke up like fucking 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. And I don't know why they got back together, because they played tiny rooms. It was really weird. But yeah, I think maybe it was for anniversary of Songs to Sing at the Sun, Songs to Scream at the Sun. But that's also foundational text in this kind of hardcore, shall we say. There was Comeback Kid as well.
It was also Ruiner by Wilhelm Scream was this year as well, wasn't it? 2005, I think.
No, that would have been Mute Print.
Oh, really?
Maybe. I can't remember.
I mean, we obviously covered Wilhelm Scream with Career Suicide, which was a couple of years later. But
the band, talking of which, by the way, just jogged my memory, the band Ruiner were a band that came up as well in a lot of literature as like really notable peers of these guys.
You had like Verse as well, with Sinking Ships too. Sinking Ships
Hope
album,
Conspiracy as well.
Hope Con's a great band, man. Cold Blue, their first album, which came out in 2003, is really good. Also the Sinking Ships record, Disconnecting, is also really good. This is when Comeback Kid came around as well. I think their second record, Wake the Dead, is still a great album. Christian band, incidentally, which is weird.
It's a really interesting genre because it is really quite narrow in its remit. You know, it's quite a narrow set of features that define it. As soon as you start doing too much, you inadvertently end up out with the genre and doing something else. And it does have a really loyal fan base. Like I said, like I remember being in Dundee and the guys with the Strike Anywhere and Rise Against t-shirts pointing at the ceiling, singing along with all these things, and really pounding their chest and stuff. And it's a dead sort of, there's a ritualistic aspect to these kind of melodic hardcore shows. And hardcore shows, it's like they don't expect anything different. It's just a ritual that they enjoy to go through. And I'm not looking down on that. I'm just saying there's something quite prescribed about the sound and quite prescribed about the conduct of it. If
you think about it this way, man, like,
you know what I mean?
It's like the pop punk kids grew up and started listening to this. This is like the next gen. This is like the next stage of their life. This kind of music, you know what I mean? That's what a lot of the people who are into this kind of music come from, that, or they come from emo. Do you know what I mean? It's like the next thing.
Pop punk's when you don't have any bills to pay, and melodic hardcore's when you realise you got bills to pay.
Yeah, exactly.
Life gets harder.
Yeah, pretty much.
You start to stop idealising the world.
Parallel to the new metal kids then go into heavy metal, and then, you know.
And new metal's exactly when you're just unemployed and living in a trailer park, so you don't have to worry about bills.
Or you're 14.
Pop punk is what the melodic hardcore guys do on a Friday and a Saturday night to try and pretend they're younger than they are and pine for that era when they didn't have bills to pay. Yeah. Now I get it.
Yeah, see, totally get it, man. Totally get it.
So wait a minute. So the first two records by this band came out in Death Wish, didn't they?
Yeah.
And then they signed it to Equal Vision
from Midnight in America. Yeah.
For the one after this, which is Ray Capo's label, the guy from Shelter and Youth of Today. Is that right?
Yeah, and produced by J. Robbins, that record.
Loads of interesting stories about Ray Capo, by the way, if you've never really read about the guy, but he was like a very he's a Buddhist, wasn't he? And he was the guy that went on a tour with his wife in Italy, including visiting a vineyard, and then was assaulted by somebody that recognised him and saw him tasting wine in this like tiny little vineyard in Italy, and they tossed the wine all down him.
So straight-ish kids, man, fuck's sake.
Fucking Ray.
Can't take him anywhere. That was a thing for a while in the early 2010s, man. It was
Ian Mackay had a coffee thrown on him. Yeah, despite the fact that Ian Mackay never was straight edge, he just sang the words in a song.
I mean, even Mackay is functionally straight edge, he just doesn't recognise as being straight edge.
He doesn't agree with it as a... Well, he doesn't want to be part of any sort of like, you know...
Yeah, much like Jesus Christ wouldn't agree with most of Christianity today. Ian Mackay doesn't agree with the scene that he created.
And Satan wouldn't agree with Satanism.
He would not.
Do you think this is far too fucking nice?
Yeah, what's going on? Why is there no hellfire? What's the pits and the fucking forks and shit? Like, it's like
that version of Satanism that Alex Jones and the Republicans described. That's what I wanted.
Exactly. None of this self-care shit.
I wanted you to kidnap children and murder animals. Fuck's sake.
You guys can't get... You humans are the fucking worst.
So Mark, tell who are Modern Life is War?
So Modern Life is War are a band from, like I said earlier on, Marshalltown, Ohio.
Iowa. You said Ohio earlier on as well.
I don't know why I keep saying Ohio. From Marshalltown, Iowa, which is a town of 26,000 people. What I find really interesting is how they come across this sound in a town that fucking small. This record is about living in that town. Jeffrey did an EMA about this, and he kind of says that although the record might seem negative, it's just like it was just his way of processing the day-to-day experience of living in a place where he didn't really know anything other than that, you know. And he still looks back on the town as being quite a good place. It's got positives and negatives, but the thing he found most interesting about it is it was a town in which there was like nobody doing anything artistic, you know. So these were like very much...
It's something I can certainly relate to, coming from a small town where fuck all happens. Well, and it's like actually comfortable and suburban, but then also boring and, you know, inward.
Yeah, it's quite a rural place.
Two points. First of all, we're going to mention Marshalltown during the Nexus and my one anyway. The other thing is I saw, believe it or not, in a Kerrang interview, and I was quite pleasantly surprised and impressed. Kerrang asked him a question in 2018 about what is Marshalltown, Iowa like now compared to pre-Trump. It voted for Obama previously, and now it's flipped to Trump. And I think in contrast to what you're saying, his replies were a lot more negative. He was like, look, that town has always been infested with racism. It's always had this large undercurrent of suspicion and alienation. All it took was somebody to make people feel comfortable voicing the beliefs that they'd always had. And he's like, so when I see people saying it now, he's like, those people were saying it already, but they were just whispering it before, whereas now they feel comfortable shouting it.
Yeah, but I think also, I read that interview as well, and I think that that stands for the whole of America. Like, that's not just Marshalltown.
Well, I think it's...
I don't think he's necessarily... he's been asked directly a question about Marshalltown, but I think it's more of a comment on that underlying...
I'm not sure about that, man, because the thrust of the question is, why did it flip? How can a town go from voting for a black Democrat to
but
voting
America
for a
did
white
that.
supremacist?
That's exactly what the whole of America did.
I mean, I think that's a gross oversimplification, man. Like, America didn't do that in terms of, like, California didn't do that, New York didn't do that,
Yeah, I know.
Most of the major cities, even major cities in places like Texas and that, didn't do that.
Yeah, but this town probably went from 45 Republican to 55 Republican, so it's not like the entire town flipped and was, oh yeah, I forgot we were all racist.
No, but I mean, it's still a valid point. 25% of the Democrats that voted for Obama reportedly either voted for Donald Trump or didn't vote. Mm-hmm. That's a quarter of people, and that applies largely to places like Iowa, like the Rust Belt states. And I think that's an interesting phenomenon. Like, how does a town go from backing a black president to suddenly backing a white supremacist? I think it's a valid line of inquiry, and I don't think it applies uniformly across the states. I think a lot of the states was horrified that he got elected, and it's interesting to hear the reflections of somebody that grew up in that, not surprised. He's like, no, this has always been there. It just took somebody saying it was okay to say it. And I think that's the same in Britain. I don't think any of us were massively surprised to find that there was a festering culture of racism, especially in England. I think we've lived with it our whole lives. I was like, all it took was the right preconditions to say to people, look, you don't have to be ashamed. That's just your opinion. Opinions are fine. That's just your, you've got every right to say that. And once you give people that permission, once people feel comfortable venting the worst aspects of their personality, then yeah, they do quite quickly come to the surface. I kind of relate to that.
My point is, if you read the rest of that answer that he said, he doesn't just throw his hometown into the bin and say, oh, it's a racist shithole. He finds positives in his place.
Not that it's a shithole, but he was more negative about it, though. He's
more negative about it, but he also understands the reasons that a lot of the people there have been left behind, and he can see why they've turned to racism because of ignorance, and he says that, and that's what I'm saying about, I feel like that's a point that then can be carried through the whole of American society. I didn't get a sense of him throwing the town away like you did.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of spoke about it just before we started recording as well. I'm just wary of, like, I know if you take America as a whole, that's clearly the trend, is that it's flipped from having a black president to having a white supremacist president. But I just mean, we spoke ourselves about how, Trump was elected with this, like, massive deficit in the popular vote. And indeed, I was, listening to a lot of people examining the figures in depth, and it looks very, very possible that in the next election in 2020, he might lose the popular vote by even more, much more, 4.5 million, and actually win the Electoral College by more. So it'll be even more of an astonishing result based on the way it's currently shaping up. We're like, oh, he's really unpopular, but he still might win the Electoral College, and that's dependent on places like Iowa, on places like North Carolina and Florida, where it's not the whole country flipping. Other, like, the vast areas of that country, especially the major cities, are solidly committed to these sort of inclusive ideals. But the places that seem to flip-flop in bad circumstances are more often these rural areas. And yeah, he doesn't throw it under the bus, but I do think it is interesting just to sort of appreciate that country isn't uniformly in flux. The flux is happening in these areas, and they're largely white areas. I mean,
the Reddit Amy answer that I read was for 2015, and he said that Marshalltown was a great place to live and grow up, and a lot of amazing people live there. I don't think I ever intended to mythologise it, but I did want to represent where we came from in a very vivid and specific way. But I'm not as critical as many people are led to believe. But things can change. His overall point is it's a unique place, and the working class small town mindset and lack of art and culture really influenced me in both positive and negative ways. And also going back to the thing with rural areas, like my flatmate's for Fife, and he always talks about farmer Tories, because it is mostly a rural real people who really don't have any connection with other cultures who will then go on and vote right wing. You know, and
up here at least. I mean,
and in England as well.
No, it's not the case in England, man. Because I mean, some of the biggest cities in England, the north, for example, some of those towns are hopelessly in the thralls of fucking UKIP, or the Brexit parties are now known.
But if you look,
but that is a separate issue, because that's that whole Labour versus, Labour Brexit supporter.
I'm just saying. I think up here that's that's actually weirdly true. But I think in England, cities like Birmingham, which is a massive cultural melting pot, seems to also be really suffering from that proximity, that kind of cultural resentment.
I don't know. Like I think even in the South England, where there's a lot of farmland and stuff as well, a lot of people tend to vote.
Absolutely, but that wouldn't be enough to. And where we don't have an electoral college system, that wouldn't be enough to really put someone in power here. I think the problem here is subtly different.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same kind of thought process as like ignorance is bred from a place where I guess it's foisted upon you by the media and by people who can shout the loudest, which is the case that we're living in right now. Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of the media thing. I'm kind of skeptical about that.
I'm not saying that's something that I fully buy behind, but I mean, a lot of people are very influenced by The Sun, for example.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's why you shouldn't buy it. That's one of the reasons why you shouldn't buy it.
Amongst many.
Yeah, amongst many.
So the record itself, man, I have to say, I quite like it, but I think I preferred the album after it.
Okay, well, I want to talk about the records before.
Yeah, let's talk about the chronology and the other records.
So the first record was 2006, My Love My Way. Which 2003, sorry. I don't know why it's 2006.
It says 6 on Spotify, but
2000, came out the same year as Coldplay, then by Hope Con. This is a much more hardcore record as opposed to melodic hardcore, but there's still some hints of it. There's got some cracking songs on it. Clarity, Self-Preservation.
This is a record that my cousin Ian bought because I think he'd read a review or something like that, and then I copied it onto my computer, and then we both listened to it and we were like, I don't think I like it. But that's because, well, interestingly enough, he was a pop punk kid. He was like, came from NoFX and Mad Caddies, but then he ended up going down a Dillinger Escape Plan route. And I was in, on my way down the Meshuggah route.
well documented your descent.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember listening to this record and I didn't like the vocals at all.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Like, that's one of the big things. Like, that vocal, that is one note, right? It's like a one note holler.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's either like it or you don't. There's no getting over it, really. I don't think.
And then there just wasn't enough. There just wasn't enough shit going on.
Yeah, there's not
like
compared to other records. Yeah, there's not a lot anything going on. It's all kind of like getting hit in the face with a hammer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's all quite blunt. And then Witness obviously comes next. Which we'll talk about in a minute. Then the one you said you like, Chris, Midnight in America.
I just thought it was a wee bit more imaginative.
I don't like it as much. I thought it was a bit too long. I think I don't know.
Okay,
didn't grab me.
True.
As much.
As a full album, it's maybe a bit saggy, but it does have some really interesting approaches to instrumentation. The first track in particular,
Useless Generation's great.
Yeah, it's got like a really innovative guitar riff based on their previous work.
I like that, and then I also like Fuck the Sex Pistols.
Yeah,
I like that. It was short but blunt.
I like the name as well.
Yeah, exactly. But like it had
Humble Streets is great as well.
What was interesting about this record, and it sort of made it stand out, what was maybe lacking for me, but I understand why what lacks on the second album doesn't matter, and maybe for this whole genre why I can't get into it, but people are. It lacks riffs and choruses, right? And I like riffs and choruses.
They've got riffs, man.
Well,
maybe not as obvious as big heavy metal riffs.
They're not as obvious because they've got like nice little melodies that are going up on the guitar and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say they've got like big fucking chunky riffs. And I think like it's emotional hardcore like this, or melodic hardcore. It's more about how it's done and that overall sense of emotion and anger and that overall sound, and it sounds angry and it's like blah blah blah, and it's about being in the moment rather than the sort of takeaway memorable shit of of metal or other genres. And
I mean, a lot of it is dependent on the delivery. I think like working with Balu is really complementary to them. I think it works really well on this and the album after it. Yeah. And I think this is also mastered by Alan Deshay, West in New York. I think that sonically it's really strong in that respect.
What do you mean, When Night in America or Witness?
Witness.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think it's just it's a good team on it. It kind of maximises the material. I think there's a couple of songs that are actually a little bit weak, but they still get away with it because they've got a lot of punch in them.
Well, it's the same team again for Fever Hunting, our last record in 2000, last album 2013.
That was a comeback record because they'd split up in 2008.
An interesting reflection on that hiatus, by the way, it was 5 years, wasn't it? 2008 to 2013. A lot had happened, and that whole genre moves so fast, and so when you're away for 5 years, the ground changes under you quite a bit. And coming back after 5 years, some folks said they felt they were a bit redundant. It's like because things had moved on, whereas they were coming back at sort of the point where they kind of left off. Yeah, I mean that's the thing about this record is, I remember when it first came out, I wasn't terribly enamored with it, but I think time's been quite kind to it because it still actually sounds quite. It sounds very relevant now, because I guess there's more bands doing this than ever before, and they still do it better than anyone else. If you take time off, 5 years off, especially in a genre like punk, which moves from trend to trend so incessantly and never really seems to go backwards in the way that like pop music is big into its retro stuff and things like that. I don't know, you can sound a wee bit out of time. I feel. Yeah, it's just my opinion, I guess. But I guess a lot of bands like Defeater, Touche Amore, La Dispute, Me Without You are probably another foundational band who didn't stop being a band, but kind of just didn't do it for a long time, and then have come back later. All kind of of this same ilk. So I guess when this record comes out, Fever Hunting comes out, it's right in the midst of that like boom for this kind of music. Defeater just started going, releasing good records, Touche Amore as well, and it's all very much of the same kind of thing. And those are bands that I like as well. Just don't like them as much as Modern Life is War, because it's like sometimes you just kind of be the original. What I was going to say about the breakup thing is Cards on the Table. I've interviewed Jeffrey and Chris, the singer and bass player, nicest guys. I remember we couldn't find anywhere to interview them, so I done it at the back of the Classic Grand on the stairs where everyone's smoking fags apart from me. And he was talking about how they regret saying they were going to break up, because it was like we were just sick of being on the road all the fucking time and really feeling as though we weren't getting anywhere. And I'd run out of things to write about because I was on the road for so long. I had no experiences left to write lyrics about. So I had to go away and live some more life and come back and do this thing. And even though they were playing in that show in Glasgow to very few people, they can go to festivals and play to a lot of people who actually know them. And they were saying, like, Chris, the bass player in particular, is a software engineer now, and he's saying, like, man, I can just book some holidays and go off like to Europe for 2 weeks and play some people, and they'll know what we're doing, and that's fucking cool, and I can just come back home and go back to my life. It's like, it's fucking awesome. And it's a testament though to the disappearance of the musical middle class, because that means he's basically musical working class. Yeah. Literally. So I mean that kind of middle ground is gone. You're either massive and doing well sustainably, or you're doing it as a hobby on your 2 weeks from work. Yeah, even like a pivotal band in a genre. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons. That's another reason why I wanted to nominate them for this, because like they're not even full-time band anymore. Yeah, they're not even full-time band, but then bands that they have heavily and clearly influenced, like Touche Amore and all those bands, are full-time and touring the world and probably doing all right. Definitely doing all right, man. Yeah. We talk about the records. Yeah, let's talk about the records. So one of the things that you probably... What's the deal with the Hell is for Heroes thing? I don't know. So the first track's called The Outsiders, but then it's got this kind of subtitle of Hell is for Heroes Part 1. Yeah, and then the last song has also got Hell is for Heroes Part 2. See, this kicks off, and I was like... It's the name of a film, you know that, right? I don't know if I did know that, actually. Yeah, it's a war film from Vietnam. Joins up at least 3 dots then. The intro to this... I was a bit like, oh fuck, here we go. I think the intro is a perfect example of it being overly earnest and overly clunky and sort of like, oh yeah, okay, we get it. feels really generic. I get that it's a genre thing. I get that that tropiness is part of melodic hardcore, but I was just rolling my eyes like a motherfucker. Although I think it's about 1 minute 30, 1 minute 35, there's a really good dissonant guitar part that comes in and kind of like takes it up a level into something really quite interesting. I think
and the production is good. Absolutely. Yeah, we've talked about that, but it's like
can't really fault it. Yeah,
it sounds big, and they've got those big, expansive like open chords, and
it's also
nice
really
tones.
It's raw without sounding like shit as well. Do you know what I mean? It feels like a band's been captured right in the studio doing that.
Yeah, they're like, right, we've got guitar 1, guitar 2, bass, vocals, drums. We're going to make each of those things sound as good as they can, but it's going to be heavy.
I like the intro because it's like winding up this coil, it's like winding up the spring. You can feel the tension kind of being pent up, and
I think it knows its market. I think it knows who's going to be listening to it, and it knows what they expect, and it knows that there's a kind of contract that's like, this is you want us to provide this.
Yeah, and they're a live band as well, so it's like you could definitely imagine this being the intro music to the first circle pit of the tour.
Yeah, whereas by contrast, the first track on the album after this is so much more interesting, so much more like, whoa, I didn't expect that.
I completely disagree with that, because nobody was doing anything like this at the time, so this is like completely fertile ground for them,
so
and
it's their fault.
For the genre. Like it could be.
That is it.
Totally.
Like, this is 2005. You got to remember, this has been done so many times since. But yeah, they were definitely one of the first people to come out and just like be so straightforward at doing it.
Yeah, and we've just spoken about how like the My Love My Way like sounds not completely different, but it's a lot more straight up hardcore Bane style. This is like bringing in that emo influence, which nobody was really doing, which is another reason why I brought this in, because like this is like a foundational text for a kind of music which is so rote now. You know?
And I think it's interesting that you go, oh, it's cliched, but it wasn't cliched at the time. That's a sign of its influence.
Well, I guess in the interests of ultra earnestness as well, Martin Atchett, second tune
film from the book Skin,
it's named after a thalidomide skinhead boy. True story.
I haven't read the graphic novel, but
chorus has got a really nice guitar bit in it.
It reminded me of actually Alexis on Fire guitar, like that.
It's a nice bit. It's kind of panned to one side. It's kind of pretty. As you say, it's not chunky, but it is a riff. It's like a kind of picked riff as opposed to something that's
but I can't remember what it is. But I just know I liked it. Which is kind of my overall thing with this record is I can't remember any of it, but I would go and listen to it again.
It's not freaking Elise.
It's nice. I enjoy the aesthetic of it.
This record's not a concept album, but it does feel as though it tells a story, like musically, like this is that. Like,
oh yeah, definitely, and it's fast. It's only 9 songs, 27 minutes. It flies by, but it's not like, oh, here's 9 songs that are identical. There's a lot of variety in the song structures, and it's got like little sort of 1 minute 30 tracks that are basically just breaking it down. And
to that end, I think actually I'm really glad they followed it with Johnny and Jimmy. I think it's that the pace of that one, I thought that was one of the standout tunes on it. Really enjoyed the fucking adrenaline.
It's a bit more furious musically.
Really direct.
That fucking flange thing just at the intro is really really weird. I don't know if Kurt Ballou would recommend they do that again. It's a bit like, what pedals do we have a line about? Alright, we'll try that one.
There's a really good example in the second verse of the guitar dynamics, the way they play off each other and do like different non-hardcore things.
Such a quick song. I'm not sure what we're talking about as second verse, but there is a bit about like 55 seconds into the song, which is actually, given the length of the song, quite far into the song. There's a bridge kind of bit that's brilliant.
That's the bit I'm talking about.
Maybe the best bit.
I really liked it.
And the octave chords and the minor keys in that song as well are so nice. Like, octave chords are coming out like the older or the other end of melodic hardcore, you know, the Rise Against the style stuff. Huge thing, which
I fucking love me an octave chord.
I fucking love octave chord, man. I could play them all day long. I am an octave chord in person. And then you follow out in Marshalltown. This is something the band had never done before. Like this literally comes out of nowhere if you think of their career. And it's a little more slow and melodic, and it kind of builds up. But it's a nice breather, I think, after like the
See, this is the sort of song that I think has now been done to death.
Yeah, exactly.
That I see so many bands do, and I've been to so many gigs where the hardcore band and then they do this song, and it's like Defeater have done it, and Touche Amore and Have Heart and all these bands, and I've seen Glasgow bands do it to fuck. And I'm like, this does nothing for me.
This is for those guys to sing along. You know what I mean? It's for those guys to like, word for word.
It's the bit. It's uniform. Just the bit that I just don't get, because it's like, this is the earnest part, and we're gonna think about how tough things are, and then we'll do a fast bit that's interesting later. But this is slow and boring. But I understand it, and I understand that like on this record, it hadn't been done to death.
Yeah, this is when I go to the bar.
Yeah.
I'm taken out of the wave drive, in and around the north side of town, where the smoke from hell's exhaust pipe lingers above the cheap rent in the dark night.
It's a very brief jaunt to the bar, though, because then you've got Dead Ramones, or DEADRAMONES, which is my favourite song on the record because it's just a bop. It's just a proper hardcore punk
It's
song.
really upbeat. Yeah.
It's upbeat, and it's like got a proper like old school hardcore fucking like Danzig riff or something, and then
I'm glad this tune's on it.
Just before the summer, knowing that we're stuck here, and there's something happening somewhere, knowing we gotta get there. Shoot what they say, death is more perfect than life, that's why we already died.
this was fun. I like it.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
It's
Loads of
fucking great
enthusiasm
live
in
as
it,
well,
yeah.
especially the gang chant at the end is so good.
And then Young Man comes in.
Young Man on a Spree.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a bit ominous.
I know.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because this is like one of those tracks that's sort of really spreading the sound of the record. And is it a song in itself, or is it a part of an album?
I think it's an interlude. I see it more as an interlude.
I was extremely meh about this song. It never really arrives. It's like that.
Well, I liked it. I liked
think that's
what it
the
did.
point of it.
I liked it.
I felt anyway.
Because in the context of the record, I did kind of want the drums to free up a little bit and go a little bit jazzy, because it's like, oh, this is a hardcore drummer being as unhardcore as possible.
Yeah.
But then I'm just like, I know exactly. I'm like, oh, just go offbeat once. But I like what it did to the record, in that it sort of lets it breathe a little bit.
It's like
I can't
it's
feel
like they're restrained, like it's like they're restraining from getting to the end point, which they'd just done. Like they'd just been really explosive and cathartic in the last song. It's like teasing you to do that again, and it doesn't happen.
I kind of feel like the album is 23 minutes long, and they were like, we need to do something else.
Nah. I think it works in the context of the record.
It kind of I'm Not Ready expands the idea of Young Man this way a little bit. It's like the same song, but also like in cinema, you know, like, it's sort of like full colour.
Yeah, big and chunky.
It's another super earnest tune, though. Super fucking earnest. I think if you were being kind to it, you'd say it wears its heart on its sleeve.
But the big that's a
Big
band,
chords.
isn't it? Surely. It sounds nice though. The actual sound of it is really nice. These big open chords, and
it's good at what it does.
Yeah.
It's corny, but it's good at what it does.
Yeah.
Let's agree to leave it at that.
It's not corny. It doesn't sound like corn.
Not like corn.
That'd be weird.
If only.
Young Man Blues has got some good riffs in it, man. Probably the most riffy song on the album.
Yeah, it's big and chunky.
Fuck, man. Honestly, the title of this tune dated it so much, because it's so clearly from before the kind of Me Too era, of when it was no longer really that great
Hard
to see
be a
young men
man.
talking about how hard it is being young men. You're like, It's very much of its fucking era.
Yeah, I've written
Like,
here this.
I'm a young man and life is hard.
I've written here like I don't really like the lyrics of this song, but it does have some of the best riffs in the record,
Yeah,
in
I
it.
kind of want it to be a bit faster though.
It's cold world after picking to betray myself again. Some faces bed, shiver in betrayal. I want them ever again.
I felt they were kind of holding back a little bit.
It's
some
decent, it's decent enough. It's not. It didn't. This tune didn't blow me away. The vocal was fine as well, but yeah, I just I couldn't get past that kind of white male moping thing.
Mhm. And then it ends with hair-raising accounts of restless ghosts.
I'm just a factory worker's son from a railroad town. And yeah, I can feel the steel mills rust. But I've been doing my
Which is,
That's actually a good name. I don't know why you have to then tack the hell as for
Oh,
heroes.
yeah.
thing on it.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't understand why they did that either. It's like I like this song a lot. It's a proper conclusion to the record. It's like the whole album's like a parable of living in this rural town in America, and this feels as though it's definitely like the end of that story.
Yeah,
I think it's maybe a little bit ironic that given that this is melodic hardcore and kind of, you know, so parallel to like emotional hardcore and so inflected with clear displays of male emotion, I don't actually feel an emotional click with it. I think like when music is this brazenly trying to appeal to your emotional side and your sentiments and elicit a reaction, I actually find it harder to emotionally engage with it. It doesn't really.
But it's interesting. I used to live with somebody for a few years that absolutely adored Modern Life is War and music like this. He was just a hardcore kid. Yeah, it was interesting. Just we'd go to a lot of the same shows, but then, you know, when a band like this came on, he'd be down in the front and like hitting his chest and I fucking get this, and I'd be like,
At the bar.
I can't wait till the band with riffs comes on. But it's interesting, and like, yeah, it's just interesting how close we were in musical taste, but then just didn't quite
One thing.
get that little bit. Yeah,
I think it's a good end to the record. I've written here some more cracking sad boy riffs.
Can you spell
Yeah.
boy B-O-I?
I have spelled boy UI, yeah. And big octaves again, and the big chunky chords come back in doing the octave thing, but bigger. And I like the way his voice kind of breaks in this song as well. And then the end,
It's very emotional.
cool ending as well. I like the ending.
It certainly doesn't overstay its welcome.
It does not. They
Like-
never do.
It's succinct, yeah.
Mhm.
yeah. I was torn between this and the third record, but there were definitely a few more interesting parts. The touchstones of when they veer into more progressive territory and they sound a bit more like Fear Before the March of Flames or Poison the Well or Botch even, that's when it gets more interesting to me and I like it, and that definitely happens more on the third record.
Mhm.
But I also don't think the third record is nearly as consistent all the way through. There's definitely some really boring songs on that, whereas I think this, as much as it's not a genre that I get, I quite enjoyed listening to it, and I can see how this is the one that sort of defines them and is probably the most consistent of what it is.
And it's a genre touchstone as well.
Yeah, and they're definitely a band that are underrated and hugely influential, and yeah, that I think we should recognise. Chris
Doesn't want to.
is so cynical
so-
about their emotions.
And I hope you guys remember this in future when I bring stuff to the table. I don't like the album massively. I think there's like 2 or 3 songs in it that are good, but I like the fact that the band is there. I really acknowledge the fact that they're under-recognised and that there are names within that genre that I'm not massively familiar with that have meant a lot to a lot of people, or even doesn't not necessarily a lot of people, but a lot of people within that genre proportionately. And so I want to recognise that, and I will take your word, and from what I've read, the word of others saying that this is an outstanding album, objectively for fans of that genre, and is probably their outstanding album. And even though I do find some of their other material more interesting, yeah, I'll put it in, because I think it's good to represent stuff that I'm not necessarily massively invested in. I've made my reservations about the genre abundantly clear, but it probably still does on balance deserve to go in.
I mean, I like this genre a lot, and the bands who do it now, bands like Defeater, bands like Touche Amore, I don't think they've even written records that come close to this. They have written some really good records and stuff, don't get me wrong, but yeah, this still stands out to me as being the thing that everybody copies, that wants to have. They want to have this, but I think circumstances of how this was written and what the band were like and where they were from play a huge part in their desire and drive to actually create some art in a place which was completely devoid of it. So other bands are coming out of scenes influenced by this stuff, so it's probably going to be a lot harder to actually attain such, I don't know, artistic purity, I guess, if you got to be wanky about it.
Well, considering that we've now talked for more than twice the length of the actual record itself, we should probably decide to put it in and then do our Nexus.
Yeah, I mean, let's get fucking real on these Nexi, because I've got a peach. Are we going to do it?
Who did we draw?
Echo the Dolphin.
Echo the Dolphin, thanks to Craig Carrick.
Yeah.
So we're going from Echo the Dolphin to Modern Life is War.
Yeah,
I thought it was going to be a hellish one.
Oh, we need a jingle.
And it's turned into a beast.
Yeah.
This is the first time we're seeing Nexus tonight. Will it be the last? What do they have in store for us? Not good.
Why am I here? You're in the Nexus. This is the Nexus. For you, this is what you want.
So just to clarify, because I keep getting this mixed up, it's Echo to the band, not the band to Echo.
Fuck off, it's band to Echo.
Dude, he's not got it by now, man.
No, I've actually written it down as the band to Echo. So the original guitarist in the band is a chap called Matt Hoffman, who plays on this record. He plays in what you could kind of call a punk rock group.
Super glip.
That's what I feel like right now. It's 22 degrees in Glasgow and I'm gloopy.
Yeah, I mean they are pretty gloopy as well. The band I'm about to mention, I'm not a particularly big fan of. A band called Only Crime, which features Russ Rankin from very well known skate punk band called Good Riddance, and of course the former drummer of Black Flag, Bill Stevenson, who's also a producer.
Fuck me, man, you've mentioned that guy in at least 50% of our episodes.
Yeah, every single melodic hardcore record comes back to, this should be the Bill Stevenson Nexus really when it comes to melodic hardcore records. Bill Stevenson briefly played drums in the Lemonheads.
Is that true?
Yeah, he played drums on their 2006 self-titled record.
I did not know that.
In 2009, which is the record after their self-titled album, Mr. Evan Dando, he recorded a cover album called Varsins, and Liv Tyler performs on the album doing vocals on the Leonard Cohen cover of Hey, That's No Way to Say Goodbye. She's the daughter of Steven Tyler, whose birth name is Stephen Victor Tallarico. Stephen is a cousin of a video game composer called Tommy Tallarico.
That's a good Nexus.
And he was responsible for the soundtrack of the 2006 game Jaws Unleashed, which was the final game produced by the studio Appaloosa Interactive, the studio who used to be called Novo Trade International, and that studio produced Echo the Dolphin.
That's good.
That is very impressive.
That's really good. Whose homework did you steal for that?
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll go next. So Modern Life is War are very related to Jacob Bannon of Converge. He signed them to his record label and designed a couple of their album covers. He has also designed artwork for fucking loads of bands. Apparently he did some artwork for Sepultura.
I didn't know that.
Can't believe that.
But he also did some stuff for Give Up the Ghost.
I fucking love that band.
Also known as American Nightmare.
Used to be called American Nightmare, yeah. And they get sued.
Who did they get sued by?
A band called American Nightmare.
I was gonna guess that as well.
Fair play. So they were like a hardcore punk band from Boston, who at one point featured a Mr. Frank Iero. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Iero,
Frank Iero. Frank Iero, is more famously known as the guitarist in My Chemical Romance. My Chemical Romance, their track was the opening song on the official soundtrack to Watchmen, the 2000...
The film.
Yeah, the film.
The Bob Dylan cover of Desolation Row.
Oh, well, there you are. They covered Bob Dylan, Desolation Row, and Zack Snyder's...
Excellent graphic novel adaptation.
Yeah. Horrible graphic novel adaptation.
A film that divides the critics and audiences alike from 2009. But it's also the film that Alan Moore, the writer and original comic book writer of, said, right, no more, stop making my films because you keep fucking them up.
He's actually just retired from comic books as of last week.
Yes, indeed. So, Alan Moore, English writer, very, very famous. He did V for Vendetta as well, Swamp Thing. To
be fair, V for Vendetta, the film is abysmal.
Yeah.
It's not very good, is it? Now, Alan Moore was one of several professional creators who encouraged a person to get into comic book writing. This guy's name was Lou Stringer. He's a freelance comic artist and scriptwriter who says that in the early 70s he used to do a series of fanzines featuring his popular Brickman character. And Alan Moore was amongst the professionals who said that he should carry on. Lou Stringer later went on to be part of the core creative writing team for Sonic the Comic.
Oh, wow.
The UK-based comic book in the sort of 1993 to 2002 it was published. So there was a Sonic the Hedgehog comic book that was based in America that was like way more graphic novel-y, but this was like a sort of Beano stroke Dandy type of kids comic.
Did it have disturbing teeth?
No, do you know what? It looked like Sonic.
Did you see that? Like the audience testing on the Sonic film has not been good because he's got human teeth.
The film looks really, really terrible.
Not as bad as Cats.
Now, of course, when Sonic the Comic started out, it was mostly Sonic the Hedgehog, but in 2 different series, there were spin-offs, including one of Echo the Dolphin.
That's mental. Wow.
A fellow Sega Mega Drive game.
Wow, that's pretty good.
I am truly impressed that we managed to avoid going down even vaguely related routes. But honestly, I've got a fucking monster here, right? And I'm going to try and talk fast because I don't want this to be a long episode, but I've excelled myself in this one, right? So Modern Life is War are from Marshalltown, Iowa, not Ohio.
Not Ohio.
Which actually currently apparently only has a population of 23,300.
I thought it was 26.
Weirdly though, it actually has a lot of like quite famous alumni from it for such a small town. Admittedly, no other musicians.
Almost went down that route, but I did not.
But one of them is the actress Jean Seberg, who I've actually spoken about at length on a Nexus before. Jean Seberg's a fascinating figure. One of the most touching stories I've ever read, actually. An iconic actress from a film called Breathless, released in 1960, as well as that famous cowboy film Paint Your Wagon. So Jean Seberg was the subject of an FBI COINTELPRO investigation. Long story short, alongside a bunch of donations she'd made to the Meskwaki Bucks, I think it's pronounced, which is like a Native American baseball team based near Marshalltown. She was like she was a big benefactor of like different groups and stuff. She bought them like $500 worth of baseball jerseys and stuff. But when they were investigating her payments and contributions, they found some like 10 grand plus of contributions to the Black Panthers. So in 1970, the FBI actually planted a false story about Jean Seberg via an informant of theirs, that the unborn baby she was carrying at the time was not in fact her husband's. It was the result of an affair with a guy called Raymond Hewitt, who was was really high up in the Black Panthers, and the Black Panthers was for white Americans certainly in the 1960s a domestic terrorist organisation, you know. And what actually happened was that Jean Seberg went into labour really, really early, and the child died 2 days after it was born. And there was a court case because she alleged that it was the result of like the stress and the grief and the kind of turmoil brought about by this allegation, which was basically just made as a kind of revenge strike against her for supporting the Black Panthers. In subsequent years, it really affected her marriage and stuff, and she ended up moving away and getting hooked up with somebody else who then abused her really badly. She moved away to Paris, but even when she was in Paris, her friends had said that she said she was stalked and wiretapped, her apartments were repeatedly broken into, and years later, an investigation by a paper, I can't remember what paper it is, discovered that this was in fact true. They found records that the FBI had of phone conversations even when she was abroad. They found evidence of like the break-ins being deliberate to try and harass her. Her ex-husband said that Jean Seberg had a history of suicide attempts, and she used to actually attempt suicide many times on the anniversary of her child's death. And at the age of 40, she was finally found dead in Paris in the back of a car only a few days after, she'd gone missing, a few days after the anniversary of our child's death. So a really, really sad, really tragic story, and one of those stories that shows you why the FBI used to be seen as such an ominous and secretive and shady organisation. The FBI also had an investigation file on Mr. Carl Sagan, or relating to Mr. Carl Sagan, due to a 1938 letter that he was sent by somebody calling themselves M. Springfield. And in this letter, it claimed that Carl Sagan was one of the only people that could prevent the apocalypse, and it was all to do with the onset of World War III. But in the letter, the person, Mr. Springfield, predicted a number of things, one of which included a Columbia shuttle disaster, and they kind of went into detail saying it'd be brought about by a fuel leak. Now, the FBI interpreted that as actually as a bomb threat, and so they started investigating it. They tracked down this Mr. Springfield, whose wife actually said, no, he's been dead for 10 years, so whoever it was using an assumed identity. The crazy thing is that 20 years after that, the Columbia shuttle disaster did in fact come to pass. So it was a really weird detail. Yeah, so Carl Sagan, who was involved in that investigation, another writer called James Gunn, claims that Carl Sagan once confided to him that James Gunn's book, The Listeners, was in fact the main inspiration for Carl Sagan's famous book Contact. The Listeners was actually voted as an unrecognised classic by New Scientist. Not so long ago, they assembled a panel of people to talk about great overlooked works of literature. So there you go, Unsung Podcast.
Unsung Books.
The Listeners by James Gunn is apparently a really amazing book talking about alien contact. Bear with me here. The Listeners, in it, mentions a group called the Order of the Dolphin, right? And a guy,
I know where you're going with this.
A very key figure here called John C. Lilly, alright? And it mentions them as pioneers and champions of like research into like interspecies communication. Now, John C. Lilly was a neuroscientist and a psychonaut, basically a druggie.
An adventurer.
An adventurer of the psyche,
acid, yes.
Alongside guys like Timothy Leary, who was actually photographed alongside. John C. Lilly obtained funding from NASA to research communication with dolphins as a kind of precursor, as a template to how humans might communicate with alien life if we ever encountered it. You know, if we could learn to communicate with dolphins.
Us being the dolphins in that context.
Well, yeah, very possibly. As part of that research, and when the money was forthcoming, John C. Lilly bought a house, a really old house in the coast in the Caribbean, and he flooded it. He flooded the inside of the house, like including the different levels. So the house was all sealed and the floor was all sealed, and then they just flooded all the hallways in the house so that the dolphins could swim around the house, and they had like an elevator and stuff that would let them go up and down. And it's crazy, but that enabled the researchers to try and bond with the dolphins. And there were like 2 female dolphins that were mainly kept downstairs in the house, and then there was one upstairs called Peter, right? A young woman called Margaret Lovett heard about this research that was going on, and she volunteered. She travelled to the house in the Caribbean after reading about it and volunteered to help. And Margaret ended up working really closely with the male dolphin, Peter, and the objective was to try and teach these dolphins to speak English via their blowhole. Now that sounds fucking barmy. I get it sounds fucking barmy, but they had surprisingly good results. Okay, there's a BBC documentary called The Girl Who Talked to Dolphins, and I'm going to drop in a clip of her talking to a dolphin and the dolphin talking back.
Hello. Clearly, Peter. What's on the blue? Come on. 1, 2, 3. Hungry. fish in bucket.
Fucking incredible. Like, mental. Now, obviously, it's just imitating sounds, but it is mental that dolphin is like counting along with her there. It's crazy. Now, there was also other stuff to do with that. So she worked exclusively with this dolphin, Peter. This dolphin, Peter, was very disinterested in the two other female dolphins and very interested in Margaret Lovett.
Yeah, dolphins are a bit rapey.
Yeah, and so famously, she, in order to get the dolphin to focus on the experiments and stuff, they had to like basically jack the dolphin off, and this led to the magazine Hustler doing a feature, like an interspecies sex feature on Margaret Lovett, which was like really fucking detrimental to her career as somebody that was trying to get into science from that point. And
yeah, I've read about that.
But anyway, so as the funding for that project was reduced though, John C. Lilly got like increasingly desperate to get results before they were shut down, and started to perform more and more radical experiments in the dolphins, including using like neural probes and using like pneumatic drills at the side of their tanks and stuff like that to try and disorientate them because of their echolocation, and even injecting them at one point with LSD. And when the funding stopped altogether, he actually moved the whole project back. I don't know if it was back to the United States. I think it might have been to this new facility, and the new facility was not nice. So the dolphins had apparently had a really pleasant lifestyle at the Caribbean facility. At this new facility, they were in tanks, suspended, with water being sort of like pumped past them, but they were just miserable and maltreated, and it was really, really traumatic for the dolphins. So much so, and Peter, the dolphin, missed Margaret so much so that he did something that apparently dolphins have been observed doing a number of times. He committed suicide. He inhaled the water and then sunk to the bottom and allowed himself to drown. And apparently this is a behaviour that's been noted in dolphins by researchers before.
I can't believe you managed to get human and dolphin suicide into this nexus. Jesus Christ.
Mate, we're not even done. I'm sorry. I'm trying to hurry up. To be fair to him, John C. Lilly in later years did as much as he possibly could to try and make up for that period of his life. He was deeply ashamed of it. He went on massive speaking tours to talk about it, to talk about the corrupting influences of the drugs and the money. And he then has spent decades, or he's dead now, but he spent decades campaigning for different I don't say rights, but the treatment of animals like dolphins, so they can't be kept in captivity in smaller than certain areas and blah blah blah. And a lot of that's down to him trying to make up for this horrible shit that he did at this period of the research. He, after the dolphin stuff, he went on to experiment with ketamine because he had really bad migraines.
Of course he did.
He said when he took the ketamine, he felt the migraine leaving his body. He used to call it vitamin K. And he also used isolation tanks. So he would get loaded up on vitamin K, as he put it, and then get into isolation tanks. He actually drowned once, and his wife had to resuscitate him because he was so baked inside this thing. And while he was in those tanks, he had intense hallucinations under the influence, and believed he was being contacted by omnipotent aliens that controlled everything on Earth. And they were called the Earth Coincidence Control Office. Earth Coincidence Control Office. ECHO. Right? Also, he apparently believed during one of those trips that the aliens had cut off his penis, and he started screaming, and his wife ran in, and he thought he was holding his penis out to her, and she was like, "It's hanging off you. What are you doing? It's still attached." And he's like, "No, it's here in my hand." Anyway,
ECHO is also the abbreviation for echolocation, isn't it? ECCO.
Oh, that'd be ECHO.
No, but the ECCO is like an abbreviation for something related to dolphins as well.
Yeah, well, the reason the Echo the dolphin was called Echo, though, is because Echo the dolphin's creator, a guy called Ed Annunziata, was a huge fan of John C. Lilly's writing, and said that it was John C. Lilly's writing, including the stuff about the Earth Coincidence Control Office and all the dolphins and all the alien fucking dialogue, that originally inspired Echo the dolphin. And that's why in the game it gets really fucked up, and aliens get involved, and there's like a giant head thing, and Echo gets abducted up into an alien craft and stuff through water in midair, and it's all based on this fucking lunatic stuff. So there you go, dolphins, drugs, aliens.
That's mental.
Bosh.
Well, there you are. Craig, I think it's fair to say
that's us even.
that is truly fucking nexus.
Was that Nexus longer than the album?
Yeah, I think that Nexus was longer than Modern Life is War.
See, once I started, I was like, I need to see this through because it's amazing.
Alright, Chris, grab the hat.
That was deep. Alright, so next week, well, we're going to have to do a Nexus, but we're also going to have to do an album.
Yeah.
And it's my turn to choose an album, and we're going to do something very different. Okay. We're going to do something weird. We're going to talk about hipsters and wanks.
That's coming for you. That's so strange.
We're also going to talk about bands that are good in the studio but not so good live.
We've already did Sonic Youth.
Yeah, we're going to do Salem with King Knight, which is was seen as cool as fuck when it came out by all the hipsters, but then it's kind of been forgotten, and then we'll reappraise it. That's what we'll do.
Are so
we'll
fickle, man.
reappraise it.
So David, we need to pull somebody out the hat though.
Yeah, we've got the Nexus hat, and we're going to have to connect Salem.
I've added the new names
Okay,
in
cool.
there as well.
Let me do some rumbling. We're going to have to connect Salem to
Salem, the witchy hipster band,
a witch house band, to Kilgore Trout, and that is Morna Cannon.
Cannon, Kilgore Trout from from Breakfast of Champions, or is it Slaughterhouse 5?
Yeah, he's a catalyst for the main characters in Slaughterhouse 5, Breakfast of Champions. God bless you, Mr. Rosewater.
Brilliant. Okay, Kurt Vonnegut staple then.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that'll be fun.
Thanks, Marna.
We want to get busy.
That's a nice highbrow one.
Yeah, totally.
After Echo the Dolphin.
I'll maybe go the opposite direction. I'll try and be as stupid as possible with that one.
Yeah.
And brief.
That's fine. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Go and vote. Also, give us money.
Oh yeah,
please. Yeah, we could really use a wee bit of investment. And join us next week when the world will continue spiraling out of control into a pit of absurdity. Who knows what else will have happened?
Yay!
Bye.